Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to Hussaini Mission's English Q&A session today. Just to start off the event, I would like to invite Rabil to come and read Hadith Qissa. Rabil, please start Hadith Qissa when you're ready. Rabil, please start Hadith Qissa whenever you feel ready.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري أنه قال عن فاطمة الزهراء عليه السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت دخل علي برسول الله في باس فقال السلام عليك يا فاطمة فقلت عليك السلام قال إني أجد في بدني ضعفا فقلت له أعوذك بالله يا أبته من الضعف فقال يا فاطمة فقلت ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فأتيني به فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتألأ كأنه بدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولد الحسن قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يومه فقلت عليك السلام قال يا قرة عيني وسمرة فؤادي فقال يومه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جد رسول الله فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جده يا رسول الله أتظن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوزي قد أذنت لك فدخل معه تحت الكساء فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولد الحسين قد أقبل قال السلام عليك يا أمه فقلت عليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وسمرة فؤادي فقال لي يومه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء فتلا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه والسلام عليك يا من اختاره الله أتظن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافي أمتي قد أذنت لك فدخل معهما تحت الكساء فقال إن ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله فقلت عليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن أمي رسول الله فقلت نعم ها هو مع ولدك تحت الكساء فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله أتظن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء قال له عليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسي وخليفتي وصاحب اللواء قد أذنت لك فدخل علي تحت الكساء ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبته يا رسول الله أتظن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بزتي قد أذنت لك فدخلت تحت الكساء ولما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخرج برسول الله بطرف الكساء وأمي بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحمتي لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي يرموني ما يحرموهم ويحزنوني ما يحزنوهم أنا حرب لمن هاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدوا لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم إنهم مني وأنا منهم فجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مزية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلك يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء فقال الأمين جبريل يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيتي والنبوة ومحتن رسالتي هم فاطمة وأبوها وبالها وبنوها اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم فقال جبرائيل يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أحبط أرضي إلى الأرض ليكون معهم ثالثا فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله عليك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك بعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مزية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلك يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تظن لي يا رسول الله فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحي إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وأجل فرجهم فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا مصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شياطين ومحبين إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا فقال علي إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم وقال النبي ثانيا يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبين وفيهم محمود وفرج الله همه ولا مغموما إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته وقال علي إذا والله فزنا وسرنا وكذلك أشياءنا فأسردوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. Thank you very much, Rabil. Just before I invite Brother Zaki to come and answer the English questions, I would just like to say we are looking to wrap this up by 8:15. However, if anyone does have any questions while you're listening to Brother Zaki, please ask them through the chat function on Zoom. Thank you very much. I'll now invite Brother Zaki to start answering the questions.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Alhamdulillah, it's been a good, just under 2 weeks now. And, last day today. finishing with a Q&A, inshallah, be quite good. I've got a fair list of questions here on my phone from people. But again, like Brother said, let's have as many questions as possible in the time that we have, inshallah. And we'll try and get through as many as possible. I just want to start by saying, you know, mashallah, well done to Rubil throughout the entire Ashra. He's been brilliant, mashallah, both with his recitation and the work he's been doing, helping out around the majalis, around the mission, mashallah. So massive, massive well done to Rubil, and inshallah, you know, du'as for his parents who raised him, who gave him, you know, all the talents that he has, mashallah. And having said that, we'll go straight into a question about how parents and children should be, the relationship between a parent and child. So somebody's asked, can you please elaborate on how a parent should behave in each stage of a child's life? For example, they say the first 7 years, treat the child as a master, the next as a ghulam, so as a servant, and the next as an advisor. But what does this actually mean in reality for the parents? If the child is misbehaving, how should parents react? And is our interpretation of misbehavior actually correct? And how to introduce them to Islam in a way that they embrace the religion. So this is quite a packed question, quite a loaded question. There's a lot there. Inshallah, I'm going to try my best to get through as much of it as possible. Hopefully, you know, we'll be able to answer it properly. If not, like I say, leave your questions in the chat. I'll be reading that. I've got that up on my screen as well. And we'll just keep going through everything we can. So first, how we should behave in each stage of a child's life. So the first thing to note here is where we split the child's life into 3 portions of 7 years, that means that for a parent, the responsibility of the upbringing of their child, of course, they're always responsible for taking care of their child, but for the upbringing of their child, it comes up to the age of 21 years old. 3 times 7, 21. So until that child is 21 years old, the parent has responsibilities towards them. Of course, they have responsibilities after, but responsibilities of upbringing and growth and things like that. So elaborating on this, the first 7 years, you treat the child as a master, the next 7 years as a ghulam, so as a servant, and the next 7 years as an advisor. So until they're 7 years old, so the first 7 years of their life, what we're looking at is instilling a love within them. And I want to look at this from this angle, not as to how exactly we treat them, but what outcome we're trying to get from that. So we're looking at them as a master. So, you know, whatever the child says goes. Now, what that means is that we want to instill within them this concept that nobody loves me more than my parents. Nobody loves me more than my mum and my dad. That's what we want them to kind of understand. And the more we kind of give them that love and affection, the more we can give them that feeling or leave that impression that everything they do, we're not telling them everything they do is correct, but we're telling them that no matter what they do, we will take care of them, we will support them, we'll continue to love them. Obviously, I'm not a parent. There's different nuances and facets and things like that. There's a lot of different things that go on, but what we're looking at here is trying to understand for the child what their perspective is. And I'm trying to make my answer a bit more succinct here because I've kind of thrown all sorts of things out there. In essence, we're looking at the effect we're going to have on the child. The first 7 years, the effect we want is pure love, no matter what, pure love between them. The second 7 years are the years of discipline, where we want to show them, you know, right from wrong, explain that to them. And then the third 7 years, so ages 14 to 21, or 15 to 21, that is about allowing them to grow into their own person. Now, those first 7 years, it doesn't mean we don't discipline them. It doesn't mean that we don't talk to them about what's right and what's wrong. We don't teach them. So, for instance, a lot of people will complain, especially after these majalis, a lot of people, especially sisters, will have the issue that a lot of people with young children have their young children talking and things like that during the majalis, and other people can't listen. Now, it doesn't mean you don't tell your children to sit quietly or relax or whatever, in a gentle way, of course. What it means is that you're instilling within them love. There's no strict discipline there. It's more of explaining to them what's right, what's wrong, trusting them to do that. And with that, you have to make sure that you keep it affectionate, you keep it loving. Because then the second 7 years, the second 7 years, ages 7 to 14, this is where you establish discipline. Now, there's many different ways of disciplining parents. I'm not going to tell you how to discipline your kids. But the most important one, if you spent the first 7 years instilling an unbelievable affection towards your children, an unbelievable love, the second 7 years, your discipline becomes a lot easier. Because the second 7 years, the discipline that you give to your child when they do something wrong that they know is wrong, that's the key, something that they know is wrong. In those 7 years, what you would do is not withhold affection, but let them know that it disappoints you. The first 7 years, you're building this bond between yourselves. And in the second 7 years, you're establishing that this bond, although it's unbreakable, you can lose the benefits of this bond if you don't do what is correct, if you don't do what is right by Allah Azza wa Jal. Of course, when we look at discipline in this manner, we're not talking about, school and life and whatnot. We're talking about Allah Azza wa Jal. And of course, as I say that, I have to mention that we do have, everything that is disciplined in terms of life is disciplined in terms of Allah Azza wa Jal's discipline. There's a big match up there. They go hand in hand. Now, once we spent those second 7 years establishing that discipline, and the discipline comes from what? Like I said, showing your disappointment. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean hitting your child. I can't condone that, absolutely not. But when a child has that kind of affection and love for their parent feeling upset with them will affect the child. It will hurt them. And that will hurt them in a sense that it's much more lasting. It leaves a much more lasting effect. You know how we say to adults that before you do any action, say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, think of Allah Azza wa Jal, if he's going to be happy with it or not. This is a natural way to make sure that Allah Azza wa Jal either is or isn't happy, or your parents either are or are not happy. When you think of the consequences right there, and there's no consequence greater than love. When you have love for someone, everything you do, it revolves around them. It's standard. So having that love and realizing that you're going to hurt somebody you love, those second 7 years, that's when that comes into play. And the third 7 years is when you're teaching them to grow as a human being. You're teaching them to grow as a person. So when you do have a decision, recognize that they have their own thinking mind, recognize that they have their own beliefs and thoughts and understandings. And the important thing here is when we grow people, we're also kind of molding. So as you grow and as you ask their advice, offer up your own advice as well, not in an authoritarian manner. Don't tell them, no, this is the answer, actually, you're wrong. That's not the point. Just ask them to consider another point of view. Ask them to figure out, where they stand or what they think, having presented different points of view, different perspectives, and allow them to reach that decision themselves. The question, again, like I said, was quite loaded. There was a few extra little sub-questions in there. Of course, so this was an absolutely fabulous question. I really liked this part of the question. Is our interpretation of misbehavior actually correct? That is a brilliant question, honestly. And I'm very glad that somebody's asked that, because it is a thought that we often forget to give any weight to. Is our understanding of things correct? And in this case, very important thing, misbehavior. One thing is a child blatantly misbehaving. And a child misbehaving is when you've told a child X is right, Y is wrong, and they decide to do what's wrong, knowing full well it is wrong, knowing what wrong means, knowing why they shouldn't do it. At that point, you can consider that misbehavior. A child being a child is not misbehavior. If a child is running and jumping and whatnot, that's not misbehavior. That's a kid being a kid. And even still, I can tell a child 100 times that this is wrong. If I'm not explaining to them properly why it's wrong, they're going to see that wrongness as arbitrary. They don't care about, wrongness could be anything. Until they understand why something is wrong, they're not going to want to accept its wrongness, especially if they want to do it, especially if it's something that they're attracted to. So we have to make sure that we run this in a way that, or we look at misbehavior in a way that it comes from the child's perspective. We have to remember that a child's mind doesn't work in the same way as ours, as elders, as you guys as parents. Recognizing that is one of the most difficult things of parenthood, but at the same time, it's one of the most important. if you're disciplining your child for arbitrary things, then your discipline will start to lose effect and impact. Disciplining your child over things that really matter, genuine points of misbehavior, that's when we have to start disciplining children, not before that. Not when kids are just being kids. If a child is just being a child, then it's, for instance, there's times where a child being a child isn't appropriate for the setting they're in, you know? For instance, so where I used to work, a lot of the board of directors, they were family, they were related. So sometimes you'd have people bring their kids into their board meetings. And now if you're bringing your kid into a board meeting and your kid's screaming and shouting, that's not the kid's fault. You can't discipline your kid at that point. No, you have to explain. First of all, you shouldn't have brought your kid there, but bar that, you explain to your child, look, you can't talk right now because we're having a quiet meeting or having a serious talk, whatever. You explain to them in whatever way they understand. As their parent, you'll know best how they understand. If they're not misbehaving, don't discipline. Explain to them, this is what we need from you. This is what we're expecting of you. This is how you should be acting right now. This is how you should be behaving. And this is why. Misbehavior is only when they know what they're doing is wrong and they know why it is wrong and they continue to do it. That's misbehavior. Again, that was a fabulous question to whoever asked. Obviously, all these questions come through anonymously to me. So it was an amazing question. I'm really happy that somebody did ask that. And how to introduce them to Islam in a way that they embrace the religion. One of the biggest mistakes we make when we're trying to bring children closer to Islam is we tell them everything that they need to know. We forget to do it ourselves. Remember, your kids love you. Your kids care about you. And if you show them a successful person, if you show them yourself as somebody who they love, they're going to aspire to be like you. As they grow older, those aspirations change. So throughout your kid's life, you have to remain someone who they aspire to be like. And that's not easy. That's not always easy at all. But if they aspire to be like you, and they see that you give namaz more importance than anything else, they'll give namaz that importance. If they aspire to be like you, and they see that you're giving Majlis al-Hussain importance, they'll want to be like that, and they'll want to go and sit in the majalis with you. Why? Because they love you, so they want to be like you. They want to be like you, so they're going to do what you do. Now, keeping that aspiration, or keeping yourself as aspirational, is difficult. Absolutely. It means staying relevant to your kid throughout their life. And as you get older, it's quite difficult to stay relevant to your child who's not in the same age bracket as you, not looking at the same things as you. You have to understand what your child's interests are, what they're looking for. You know, for instance, does your kid love football? If your kid loves football, embrace that. Show how football, or show how you are good at the football, or how you also love football, or how you've got something. Relate to your child as much as you can. And that, it can be difficult, but we do it. We do it in relationships. You know, we show interest in things that our partners have interest in. You have to do that for your kids as well. They will have interests that you didn't instill in them. If those aren't, bad interests, or those aren't interests that are negative, embrace it. Stay relevant to your kid's life. And if you stay relevant, then they'll aspire to be like you. And in that, you can set the perfect example. Remember, you've got to live your life the way Islam teaches you to anyway. If you're doing that and your kid wants to be like you and they see you doing that, khair, Allahu A'lam, you've done your bit, the best you can. And remember, sometimes it's difficult. You have to remember, even Nabi Nuh's children went astray. Not every child will respond to their parents' parenting, but you have to do your bit. And it's not easy, like I say. I feel like I've said that a million times over the past 12 days, but it's not easy, but you have to keep trying. Very big thank you to whoever asked those 3 questions. I asked them together. Fabulous questions, mashallah. And again, that one about our interpretation being correct. Really, really important question. We have to question sometimes, am I doing things right? We have to go back and look over whether what we do is absolutely correct, because oftentimes we'll find not necessary. The next question, how do you know the difference between a test and a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's a good question. The difference between a test and a punishment from Allah. the point of tawakkul ala Allah, trusting Allah Azza wa Jal, which we spoke about yesterday, that means that whether it's a test or a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't matter to us. We have to respond in the same way, in the same manner. We have to respond the way Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to. Now, what we spoke about with tawakkul yesterday is to be happy with anything Allah gives us. So if Allah Azza wa Jal is testing us, we have to look at it with a vision of contentment. How can we look at punishment of Allah with a vision of contentment? How can we be happy that Allah Azza wa Jal is punishing us? The important thing to remember is if Allah Azza wa Jal is punishing you in this world, it's a lot better than Him punishing you in the next. It's a lot better than Him punishing you, in the hellfire and Jahannam. So in either case, we're thankful to Allah Azza wa Jal. You can't always tell the difference. It can often be very difficult. But tawakkul ala Allah, trusting Allah, is to know that both of them are blessings. It's to know that both of them are good things. Allah Azza wa Jal is testing me. It's because I've reached a level where I'm ready to be tested. It's like you don't sit your GCSE exams in year 8. No, you have to get to a certain level. That's when you're tested. So either we understand Allah's testing us, we understand that that's a good thing because I'm at a certain level, alhamdulillah. Or Allah Azza wa Jal, He's punishing us for something. Shukr, alhamdulillah, I'm receiving my punishment in this world, not in the next. In fact, there's a dua that says, oh Allah, for all my sins that you will punish me in this world and not in the next world. The next question, could I please recommend a book on the teachings of our Imams? The best way to learn the teachings of our Imams is to learn about their lives. I think there's no better book than Sheikh Mufid's Kitab al-Irshad. Obviously, unfortunately, because these questions are all anonymous, because all these questions are anonymous, I don't know what kind of level we're talking at here. There are numerous different books. I'm talking for somebody who's, around my level of reading, who's looking at reading the kind of things I'm reading. Kitab al-Irshad by Sheikh Mufid is fabulous. There's another one, the Lives of the 12 Imams. I look at their social and political circumstance. I think it's something like that by Sayyid Ali Musawi. You can also find that online. It's also a very good book to read and to go through to understand just how the Imams' lives were, and also understand from a different perspective, the social and political aspect of it, which often teaches us how to react to certain situations. And you can see a lot of comparisons between the world today and the lives we live and the lives of our A'immah, alayhim as-salam. But again, nothing for me comes close to Kitab al-Irshad. Sheikh Mufid's, it's world famous, world renowned, and there's a reason for it. It's so in depth, so fabulous, so such brilliant, not only history, but also such brilliant commentary on the lives of the Imams. It doesn't just tell you what happened, it explains it, how it happened, why it happened, why the Imams didn't do other things or go about other routes to find their responses and answers. It's fabulous, it has everything. Question is, why did Imam Ali alayhi salam why was Imam Ali alayhi salam's name never taken directly in the Quran? There are ayats reference to him, but never a clear name. Surely this would have been a way of ensuring that the Prophet's religion and message was protected. Now, we'd think that if Allah Azza wa Jal takes the name of Imam Ali alayhi salam, that means 100% we know it's Imam Ali alayhi salam. There we go. There's nobody else. Problem is, Imam Ali wasn't the only guy named Ali. Imam Ali alayhi salam shared his name with a lot of people. A lot of people were named Ali at the time. And it's why we find in Ghadir al-Qum, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he says that Imam Ali alayhi salam will be the leader after him, what did he say? Man kuntu mawla fahada aliyul mawla. And he holds his hand up in the air. And if you look at the Arabic language, hada means this. Now, if I were to translate that into English, whoever's Lord or whoever's leader I am, not Lord rather, whoever's leader I am, this Ali is his leader too. It's odd. It doesn't sound right. This Ali. I don't really say that in English, do we? But if Rasulullah had said, Man kuntu mawla fa Aliyun mawla, whoever's leader I am, Ali is his leader. People could say, you know, it's X Ali or Y Ali, it was this guy or that guy. They're all called Ali, so it's him or him or him or him. Now, to specify, Rasulullah says this Ali. In the same way in the Quran, if the Quran wrote, you know, Inna Aliyun Wasiyur Rasulullah, masalan, if it wrote that, if it said that in the Quran, there's nothing to be able to say which Ali. So Allah Azza wa Jal, He describes Imam Ali in the Quran, He describes him again, like you mentioned in the question, you're aware yourself. He describes him in ways that nobody else can be described like that. Masalan, the most famous example is the ayah, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَالرَّسُولُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. Verily your leader or your guide is Allah and the Prophet, and he who وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ, and he who brings faith, who has faith, and prays his namaz and gives his zakat while in the state of ruku. There's no one else apart from our Imam Ali alayhi salam who did that. So by showing a very specific set of sifat, of attributes of Imam Ali, Allah Azza wa Jal takes away the ambiguity. It's not in fact the case that He puts more ambiguity in there by not saying his name. Saying his name would increase the ambiguity because there were lots of Alis at the time. The next question. I'm keen to understand what happened to Imam Hussain alayhi salam's horse. Okay, it's quite an interesting one, a question of history. The Zuljana was the name of the horse of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. After Imam Hussain alayhi salam fell from his horse after he breathed his last breath, it says that Zuljana stayed alongside the Imam, stayed next to the Imam. Some narrations say he went back towards the tents first. Pretty much all narrations say that the last moments of Zuljana were in Karbala, where he charges into the battlefield alone after Imam Hussain alayhi salam has died and is killed at that moment by the forces of Yazid. So Zuljana was also killed in Karbala. The only disparity really is whether he went towards the tents first or not. But he charged into the armies of Yazid, charged into the battlefield, and in that he was killed. There's a question here, but I've only received half of the question, unfortunately. Whoever has access to all the questions, they could send the whole one, then I'd love to answer this too. The question says that it's narrated that Imam Hussain had dug a trench around his companions to fill with thorn bushes. Excuse me. To fill with thorn bushes. It was said that these were to be set alight upon attack, and then the question trails off, so I don't know what the rest of the question is now, unfortunately. Whoever has access to the questions, if they could send that one to me, I'll answer that one as well, inshallah. What does Islam say about dealing with anxiety? Now, anxiety, very complex issue. Very hard to understand, very hard to kind of figure out. But again, like with a lot of the other issues we've spoken about, Islam's response to anxiety is not to say, have X, Y, Z thing, or do X, Y, Z thing, and then you'll be fine. In fact, it says, if you live this life, if you live your life in this way, you should be fine from all these issues regardless. It doesn't give specific cures and responses to specific illnesses. But anxiety, and I understand anxiety is a lot more than just nervousness. But when you're feeling anxious and when you feel angst, there's one very specific dua, and I mentioned it in Majalis as well, which says, Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. Yeah? Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. It's meant to relieve you of angst, relieve you of anxiety, nervousness, worry. Now, anxiety is a tough issue, really tough issue. And we could recite how much, so I'm not going to. Again, with a lot of things, modern psychology reflects the teachings of Islam. And one of the first things you'll ever hear about when you're told about psychology or about anxiety and how to deal with it is to try and increase your levels of education on it. try and understand what it is you're dealing with, how many other people are dealing with it, and then build a community around those people. To try and understand what your struggle is. And that much is up to the Islamic view of two things. One, introspection, looking in at yourself, meditating, spending time with yourself. And two, seeking knowledge. We've covered that in the Majalis as well. It comes up again and again. There's a lot that goes on when it comes to seeking knowledge. Again, just because of time restraints, I don't want to go too deep into the issue of anxiety. It is a serious one. It's one that I hoped we'd be able to talk about in these 10 days, but unfortunately some of the other lectures went on for a little bit longer than expected. So we weren't able to. I believe there's some lectures online that I've done that's detailed properly what anxiety or how to deal with anxiety, but I'm not sure where you might be able to find them. They'll be on YouTube somewhere. Again, I feel like if somebody's asked this question, I don't want to kind of leave them unanswered. But we're looking at a complex issue. Like I say, Islam, it mirrors a lot of the things that modern psychology will tell you. It's not going to be separate, because modern psychology, modern sciences, what they are revealing and what they are teaching us are the things that Allah Azza wa Jal taught us, the things that Allah Azza wa Jal gave to us, those resources that we have from Him. Okay, so I've just received the full question that I was talking about. So it was said that the trenches dug full of thorn bushes were to be set on fire to protect the women and children from Yazid's army. Why were they not set alight to protect the women and children? Excuse me. Don't worry, I'm okay. That's just a bit of a cough. The women and children's protection from these thorn bush and things like that, the trenches that were supposedly dug. There are narrations of trenches being dug, but of them being filled with thorn bushes is a different issue. We're not sure whether they were. We're not sure whether those thorn bushes were present, whether they were found, whether they were able to be dug properly. And again, one of the issues, different narrations, different historical books, different historical reports tell us different things. Some of them leave out this trench that was dug altogether. Some of them mention the trench and say that there were no thorns to put in there. Some of them mention them and say that, in fact, it was Yazid's army who set fire to those trenches themselves. Unfortunately, in and amongst the confusions, I can't give you a definitive answer as to why they were not set alight if they were in fact there. It is just a matter of differing reports and different narrations on Karbala. The next question, what are the qualities one should look out for in a good friend? Okay. Excuse me. Are there any specific traits prescribed by our holy A'imma for friends? Okay, there are, absolutely. There's loads. And friendship is massively important in Islam, massively. In fact, Imam Ali alayhi salam said that two friends are like one soul split into two bodies. Sounds quite romantic, but he's talking in a platonic sense here. Now, friends, there's all types of people we could be friends with, all types of people who could be our friends. Imam Ali alayhi salam details 5 types of people who we shouldn't be friends with. And this is one of the most prominent and one of the most important ahadith about friendship. In fact, Imam Ali alayhi salam is one of the key narrators on friendship. It's one of the things he speaks about quite a lot. One of his ahadith say, beware of and do not associate with 5 types of people. So don't be friends with 5 types of people. First one is a person who lies. A person who lies, it's absolutely very obvious why you shouldn't be friends with. If there's somebody who lies, they'll be happy lying to you as well. If they're happy lying to you, they'll be happy to trick you. If they're happy to trick you, why are you going to be friends with them? The second type of person is somebody who openly sins, who openly does wrong. Reason for that is twofold. One, by associating with them, you're giving the rest of the world the impression that you're happy to be with someone like that, and that the reason you're friends with somebody is because you have things in common, and people will assume that you have that in common with them. The bad things they do, you do them as well. Now, we have this notion that we shouldn't worry what people think. There's a certain line to that. We shouldn't worry what people think so long as we don't give them reason to think bad on us. If we are giving people opportunity to talk bad about us, then that's our mistake. We present the best image of ourselves that we can, and then let people think and talk about what they want. That's up to them after that. But we have to present our best image first. Associating with somebody who openly sins and who openly goes against the will of Allah Azza wa Jalla and goes against what is generally good. I mean, the hadith says immoral. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean religiously immoral. Morals are held outside of religion as well. Somebody who does things that aren't right. If you spend time with someone like that, you're giving the impression that you're okay with things like that, even if you're not. That's the second type of person. The third type of person is someone who's stingy. Reason being that there will come a time, or there may come a time, where you need their help, and they won't give you their help. They won't help you because they're stingy. They don't want to help you, you know? In fact, I was talking to a friend about something like this today, something that happened between them and somebody else. A friend is someone you can turn to in a time of need. A stingy person is not someone you can turn to in a time of need. That means friend, stingy person, they're not compatible. They don't work together. You can't have both of them together. So don't be friends with a stingy person. The fourth one, and this is quite a sad one, unfortunately. The fourth one is don't be friends with somebody who's not clever, who's not smart. The word the Imam uses is someone who is a fool. Why? Because they want what's best for you, sure. They're good at heart, they want to help you. But because they're not very clever, because they can't think things through properly, they won't always make the best decisions. Even if they've got, even if they're good at heart, if they don't think about what they do properly, they're going to cause you more damage than good. They're going to cause you more problems than, solutions. So we don't really associate, we don't make good friends with people who aren't smart or who aren't thoughtful. And the last one is somebody who does not take care of their family, in the simplest terms. Somebody who doesn't take care of their family. Reason being is that a friend should be treated like family. If somebody can't take care of their actual family, can't give their actual family what their family deserve, they'll turn on you like that. You're not blood, you're not related. You didn't raise them. You weren't there throughout their childhood. To be fair, you may have been. I've got friends who were, but even still, And if they can't show that goodness to other people, why are they going to show that goodness to you? They might feel like they will, but at some point they'll switch it up like it was nothing. They'll get rid of that like nothing really happened, like it didn't matter. And in fact, it says in 3 places in the Quran, somebody who doesn't take care of their family, it curses them in the Quran. That's in Surah Baqarah, ayah 27, Surah Al-Ra'd, ayah 25, and Surah Muhammad, ayah 22. I'll let you guys go and read them up yourselves. But those 3 ayats of the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal curses people who aren't good to their family, who don't take care of their family, who don't give their family what their family deserves. And again, there's certain traits that we should be as friends, that we should have as friends. And there's a nice little story that I read, which said 2 guys, they were walking along a pathway, 2 friends. And they're walking and this bear comes in front of them. Big grizzly bear, scary. One friend leaves his other friend, runs and hides in a tree. Other friend, he plays dead. He just pretends he's playing dead. And at some point the bear leaves, he's fine, whatever. And in the sand, he writes, "Today I was betrayed by my friend." Today I was betrayed by my friend. He writes it in the sand. They go on a little while, they find a little oasis, a bit of water. And the friend who had to play dead, he finds himself stuck between the rocks at some point. Somehow he gets stuck between the rocks and he's starting to drown. And his friend who hid earlier, he saves him. So when he saves him, he scratches into a stone. Today I was saved by my friend. Back there, he wrote, today I was betrayed by my friend. Here he wrote, today I was saved by my friend. So his friend asked him the question, that day you wrote in the sand, here you scratched it into a stone. What's the difference? He says, look, if you made a mistake by me, I want to write it in the sand, which can be blown away, it can be forgotten. If you've done right by me, I'm going to write it in stone where no one can forget it, no one can hide it. Sometimes we have to look over each other's mistakes. We have to try and correct each other's mistakes always. But it doesn't always mean that you break off every bond you have. If they're a true friend, you hold on to them, you keep them. Somebody's asked a question in the chat, what is the good quality of a mu'min? Good quality of a mu'min? I'll tell you 10 and then I'll tell you a few more. Namaz, Roza, Hajj, Zakat, Khums, Jihad, Amr bil-Ma'ruf, Nahy anil Munkar, Tawalla, Tabarri. The 10 Faru'adin, if they carry those out, you can believe someone, they have Iman of Allah Azza wa Jal, but there's certain things more to that. Qualities of a mu'min. In fact, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he says, it's a bad cough, apologies. He says, on the day of judgment, the person closest with me will be the person with good akhlaq. So the best quality of a mu'min. Someone with Iman, someone with belief in Allah Azza wa Jalla. They do those 10 things. They complete their religion in that sense. They do their faru'adeen. But they also do it with good akhlaq. When you meet them, you enjoy spending time with them. When they're gone, you wish they were there. That's actually something Imam Ali says about a friend, but it applies here as well. A mu'min can be seen in their character, how they behave with other people, how they treat other people. And the long and short of that is akhlaq, manners. Do they have good akhlaq or not? Do they have good manners or not? You guys, if you can, keep sending in your questions through the chat function on Zoom. So that we can keep going. I'm just having a look at what other questions we have here. I think I've gone through all the ones that I was sent over WhatsApp, if I'm not mistaken. I have indeed. So we've got, a little bit of time left over. We want to, inshallah, make the most of that time. If you have any questions, either, about what we've said in the lectures until now, or just going forward, feel free to put them in the chat, inshallah. I'm not sure how I muted there. I'm not sure how long I was muted for either, to be fair, or what the last thing everyone heard was. Hopefully we got through the questions before I muted. I wasn't sure that. I didn't realize I was muted there. Okay, someone's asked a question here. Is Matam haram? Is it religion or tradition? Good question. Very good question. Matam, and it's something that often a lot of us do, and we don't even realize why we do it, But Matam, and bear with me, let me finish the answer before you come for my next here. Matam itself is not a religious act. Now, I say that with a very specific nuance to it. There's a very important point to add on after that. We can't just leave it at that. Matam itself is an act that is through culture. Now, what that means, and the proof of that, is that the Pakistani community do it different to the Iraqis, who do it different to the Iranians, who do it different to the Afghanis, who do it different to communities in Africa and Nigeria. And the difference here is, it is an act that is a cultural sign of mourning, but in the Furu'ideen, the 10 things that are wajib upon us, one of those is tawalla, to show love for those who Allah Azza wa Jal loves and those who the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam love. Matam is a form of showing that tawalla. The reason we believe that it is rewardable, it's a cultural act. Allah isn't telling you do matam. No, whether you cry or do matam or whatever, Allah Azza wa Jal, He's happy with it. But the reason we believe He's happy with it is because it falls under tawalla. The reason we believe it's allowed, because not every cultural act is allowed. The reason we believe it's allowed is because there's numerous narrations, either of the family of the A'imma doing martyrdom and the A'imma not stopping them. For instance, one of the very famous ones in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is the story of Hazrat Uwais al-Qarni, who heard the Prophet go out to battle. The Prophet injured one of his teeth in battle. So Hazrat Uwais al-Qarni, upon hearing this, he became very upset. When he becomes upset, what did he do? He smashed his teeth with a rock. The Prophet didn't tell him, no, Uwais, you did something terrible, flan, flan. No, he praises him. He says, thank you. Your love for me is evident. With martyrdom, it is a cultural act which is rewardable in Islam, and not only rewardable, it forms a part of our furu'ideen. We're completing tawalla, we're completing our show of love for the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam through martyrdom. So martyrdom, in the simplest way, is a traditional act or a cultural act religiously rewardable. I said simplest way, but that's not a very simple way of saying it, but you guys get what I mean, inshallah. If you have any further questions, keep them coming. It's almost 8 o'clock. I believe we've also got the Imam, inshallah, who wants to, not the Imam, the Maulana, inshallah, who will have something to say afterwards as well. I can see someone's got their hand up. I mean, I don't use Zoom a lot, but I can see someone's got their hand up. I'm not sure if that means you have a question or not. If you do, Bismillah. I think say that Aruj has a hand up. I've not actually seen that before on Zoom.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question.
Yeah, Bismillah.
Why, when, and how did you get inspired to read these knowledgeable and amazing majlises?
First of all, thank you very much for saying that the majlises have been amazing, alhamdulillah. Why, when, and how? That's a good question. So my dad is a Maulana, so he reads majlises as well. He always wanted me to kind of get into it, so he gave me opportunities, but not just me. He used to hold events where loads of kids would come, and we would all read lectures and mursiyas and nohas and things like that. I kind of carried on just from there. I remember my first ever majlis. There's a big crowd in front of me, and my dad, he was standing on the stage, and he said, it's like he's going to read. So I come up and I took the mic from him, and I looked up at him, and I looked at the massive crowd in front of me, and I just went and ran and I hid behind my dad because I thought this is way too scary. And then after that, I had this little book called Tears for Karbala. Yeah, it's a little black book. You can still buy it. It's a great little book of Masa'ib. And I used to recite that every Friday. There was an alim, may God bless his soul, Maulana Shamim al-Siddin in London. He'd done so much work for young people in the UK. It was unbelievable. We don't even realize how much he did before he passed away. May Allah bless his soul always. He used to call me every Friday to recite at his center. And I would recite the same little passage from the same book, every Friday. But I just, it was something that, because I had that always doing it, I carried on, and I was always interested in religion and always interested in Islam. So I kind of, I used to talk to my friends about it, things like that all the time. And then just through that, people started asking me, can you read at our house? Can you give a lecture here? Can you recite there? And from reciting just those Masa'ib from that book, Tears for Karbala, it kind of expanded, starting to recite actual majlises that, first my dad would write them out for me. Sometimes my sister used to write them out for me. And then I got to the point where I started coming up with my own majalis. I started doing my own research and making them myself. And inshallah, a lot of especially a lot of the younger guys and girls in Hussaini Mission get a chance to also start that little journey and get themselves involved in one way or another. It's really good. There's another question here about making dua to the alam. Okay. Making dua to an alam. It's one thing to symbolically stand underneath the alam in order to make your dua. But again, your intention is key. We have to understand our du'as, at the end of the day, they're accepted by Allah Azza wa Jal and nobody else. If we call people, for instance, Babul Hawa'ij, Masalan, Hazrat Abbas or Imam Ali Rada alayhi salam, we call them Babul Hawa'ij, the door of our desires, or the gates of our desires. What that means is that they hold a special place with Allah Azza wa Jal. So if we go for our du'as and we ask them through the wasila, or through the words, or for the love, is a better way of saying it, for the sake of Hazrat Abbas or Imam Ali Raza alayhi salam, then it's more likely to be accepted in Allah Azza wa Jal's bargah, what we call it in Urdu. But if you're making a dua to the alam, expecting the alam to grant that dua, then that's not allowed, that's not acceptable. We have to understand that the acceptor of our du'as ultimately is Allah Azza wa Jal. He's the one who either accepts or rejects our du'as, one way or another. And there's another question here. There's an ayah of the Quran saying Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear. How would I respond to people saying this is false, as shown through people committing self-harm, or worse, arguing that some people probably felt like they could not handle what they were going through? Right. It's a very good question, and it's a very difficult one to answer because you don't ever want to be insensitive to people. You don't ever want to diminish somebody's kind of their response to something or their feelings, because to them, that is what matters most, you know? That is what is key, that is what is correct. Allah does not burden a soul beyond that which it can bear. It is talking about all kinds of issues here, correct? But with that, what we understand is when Allah Azza wa Jal tests a soul or, you know, burdens it even for whatever reason, He also gives us lots of resources to deal with it, lots of resources to handle it. Sometimes it can be difficult to see those resources, to see what we've been given to be able to support ourselves. And when we can't see and we can't seem to find the supposed help that Allah's given us, then it can feel like, yeah, this is far too much. I can't handle this. I can't deal with this. The key here is to try and find those resources, and it doesn't always mean du'as, it doesn't always mean your salah, it doesn't always mean fasting or things like that, no. In resources, Allah Azza wa Jal, He gives you community, He gives you friends, He gives you family. That's resources that Allah Azza wa Jal has given you. In resources, He gives you willpower, all that willpower that you had up till the point where you felt, I have to start, you know, self-harming or doing other things. All that willpower you had until that point, Allah Azza wa Jal is giving you that in those resources and giving you that for your support. That's the resources and tools He's giving you. And I don't want to say that you're not using the resources of Allah Azza wa Jal. No. What I'm going to say is that there's always something that we can try and find, something around us that's there to help us. Allah doesn't give us all the answers plain as day. He doesn't. It's not true. It's like when you go to a test, go for an exam, GCSE, A-level, whatever it is. When you go for an exam, if you ask the invigilator to tell you the answer, they're not going to. No. Your teacher, hopefully, has given you all the resources you need. It's up to you to find those resources. You know, it's up to you to find that little compartment in your head that has the solution to that little bit in there. When it gets to a point of self-harm or worse even, we can often feel like there's nothing that can help me. This is it. What I will say is that's never the case. You're never alone. You're never without resource. You're never without support. And that resource doesn't necessarily have to be your family or your friends, because it might be the case that you're not that close with them, that you can't speak to them on that level, that they don't understand you, or that they don't get what you're going through. That happens, unfortunately. But let's say where we're living right now, the NHS resources, they're not the most amazing, unfortunately. You know, the doctors try the best they can, but they're limited by the system and whatnot. But there are always resources. There's always somewhere you can turn to. So Allah not burdening a soul beyond that which it can bear, it doesn't always mean that right now you're absolutely able to take on anything, like head on, whatever the issue is, however difficult it may be. It doesn't mean that, no. It might mean that He gives you an overwhelming problem, and somewhere in your life, He dots around the solutions. He dots around what you need to try and find that. And we have to try and find that for our own sake, before anything else, to protect ourselves before anything else, we have to try and find what those resources are. And they always will be there. They're always there. Unfortunately, we realize it often after it's too late. You know, I wish you'd have spoken to me. I wish you'd have talked to me before you did what you did. That's people there who are available, but we don't realize it. And it's not always our fault that we don't realize it. Sometimes people fail to make themselves available in the way that we need people to be available. But those resources, those tools, and I say the words resources and tools, that Imam Hussain, when I say the words resources and tools, I don't necessarily mean, you know, the standard thought of it. There's all sorts, family, friends, companions, like I said, community, your own willpower, your own strength, the power of dua is also there, although it's not, like I said, I recited most of this earlier today, that it's not a sole solution. There's more to it. There's more that somebody has asked, can we do ghusl in the niyabat of our marhumeen? Unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure which ghusl it is you would do in their niyabat, in their place. For namaz and things like that, you can do. Ghusl is a difficult one because ghusl pertains to the tahara of your own body and your own soul. It's not something transferable. Again, you'd have to ask a scholar properly to explain that to you. That's as much explanation as I'm able to give with my own qualification. The next question, we hear in the majlis that Imam Hussain brought the shaheed back to the tents, but then we also hear that after the battle, the bodies were seen on the battlefields. Were the bodies taken back to the battlefield or something else? Okay, Karbala. It's been expanded now, but it was still in that time quite large, quite big. At that time, you got the tents, you got the entrance to the tents, you got just outside the tents, you got a long pathway, you got the battlefield, you got Yazid's army, you got the River Furat. And obviously you got Yazid's tents and whatnot, Yazid's army's tents and whatnot. It's bringing around time. Imam Hussain Islam, he would bring the bodies back to the entrance of the tents. Sometimes he would bring them into the tents. Everyone would cry and weep over them. Then he would bring them back outside. Now that doesn't mean all the way back to the battlefield. That just means just outside the tents. He would bring them out there because out there they could be buried, should they need to be buried. If they were to be left in the tents, it could be several things. It could be that the bodies didn't get discovered. It could be that Imam Hussain had the hikmah, he had the knowledge to know that these tents will be burned. He didn't want the bodies to be burned. Oftentimes he took the body into the tents. Everyone would cry and weep over the bodies. Then they would bring them back out, not all the way to the battlefield, but just outside the tents, that little area there. Sayyida Arooj Zahra, we have another question from you. Bismillah, whenever you're ready.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. I wanted to ask you a question that as you are a true inspiration for for our young Shia generation, first of all. So being a mother, I wanted to ask you that how can we bring our children's interest towards gaining Islamic knowledge with love for their religion? And as in all your majalises, one thing I always noticed that you gave references of your own personal life experiences in order to have a better understanding for the audience. So kindly, if you can answer my question relating your experience, I would really appreciate it. Jazakallah.
Yeah, absolutely. The things that bring you closer to Islam, for me, throughout the years, it was different things, I'll be honest with you. As a child, I didn't really understand Islam too much. I went to madrasa every week and I got that Islam is just a part of who I am. It's just something I do. One of the biggest things when I was a child was having Muslim friends. Having Muslim friends meant that I never had to be shy about being a Muslim, you know? I never had to be shy about what I believe in. Often, like for instance, we're in this jubba. So I'm from Tooting, South London. On Friday, you'll see everyone wearing jubbas like this. So it was never something that you're ashamed of because everyone's doing it as well. Having friends was one of the most important things for me that meant I was never ashamed of my religion. After that, as I grew older, I had certain questions and things like that. I was quite blessed, alhamdulillah, that my father is a Maulana. So anytime something didn't make sense, I would think, okay, let me just ask Dad. And he could explain it to me. Not everyone's dad is a Maulana. The key thing, And this is something Hussaini Mission themselves can work on, and the parents can kind of push them to do, inshallah. Make sure your kids are familiar and comfortable with whoever the local scholar to them is. Make sure there's a local scholar accessible to them, because they won't always want to ask you the questions. Some questions, especially as you're growing up, you don't want to ask your parents. But you can ask the local imam. You can ask them, you know, this doesn't make sense, this isn't right, this doesn't seem to add up. And there's things like that you'll find Islamically that don't seem to make sense, they don't seem to add up. Make sure your kids are close to a scholar who they can ask, because when things don't make sense, in fact, when I took A-level philosophy, and before I started, somebody at the mosque, they said, make sure that you are 100% in your faith before you start this, because it's going to make you question a lot of things. And, you know, when we did philosophy of God, philosophy as to whether God exists or not, a lot of things came up and I thought, hold on, that point's right. You know, that makes sense as to why God can't exist because of X, Y, and Z. So I'd come home, I'd ask my dad, and he'd tell me. Having that connection with the local scholar, there's loads of ways to do it. Yeah. Majlis on my share used to run those camps before COVID. Unfortunately, it's, you know, all a bit up in the air now. I used to run those camps where you'd spend a few days under the supervision of scholars and things like that. And try, and inshallah, Hussaini Mission can try this as well. Really, really get close to your scholars. They're going to be able to guide you through a lot of difficult times. As I grew older, my parents gave me the license to try and learn myself, try and figure it out myself. You know, my parents didn't always tell me, you know, you have to do this and you have to do that. No, they told me, you know, have you looked into this and that? Have you kind of researched this and that? Have you read about this and that? And for me, that was massive. I told you my biggest point of finding Islam and finding Allah Azza wa Jal was when I was traveling and I saw this massive kind of ocean in front of me, and I thought, wow, massive ocean, cliffs and forests and things like that. I saw that, I was like, wow. But something my father always said before that, when I was younger, it kind of, in that moment, it clicked for me. You know, my dad loves watching nature documentaries. He loves watching, especially about animals. And he sits there and he just goes, SubhanAllah, Alhamdulillah. I said to him once, I was like, Dad, you're watching a documentary, you don't need to do all that now. And he said to me, he's like, do you not realize, like, this is, Allah's made this, it's incredible. And it was an odd thing, it just kind of stuck with me. And then when I cycled around that path, I mentioned it in Majlis before, I was cycling up this cliffside, not literally up vertical, just up the cliff. And the road kind of bent around. And as it bent around, I just saw in front of me this massive ocean with, you know, beaches and forestry on one side, and just over me was like a cliff. And at that moment I thought, wow. And then every time my dad would go, don't you realize it's the creation of Allah? It just clicked. It just kind of worked in my head. So for me, coming close to Islam it wasn't one hard and fast thing, and it isn't for anyone. It's like, it's not linear. It's not you do this throughout their lives and they'll be fine. No, you have to adapt to each moment in their life. When I was young, it was having friends. As I grew older, it was having that connection with a scholar, being able to, you know, when I question things, having the answers available to me. And then in the ultimate phase of coming close to Islam, for me, it was having that perspective that my dad had given me, that when we look at something amazing, we have to remember where it came from. And that perspective, obviously, that is something on a much deeper level. You can only do that once the child's a little bit older. When we're talking, you know, mid-teens, 15, 16, 17, once the mind's quite a bit more developed. So it's important to kind of maintain an understanding that different things will work at different times. Again, the important thing is whatever your child is interested in, whatever your child responds to, we have to go by that. You have to look at that, you know. It's why a lot of you guys will find, and somebody said to me today, in fact, I speak about football so much in my lectures. I didn't do it as much this time as I normally do, but it pretty much comes up in almost every lecture I do as a given. And that's because I know I like football. A lot of the people listening like football. And if I can appeal to something that they understand, then it makes it a lot easier for them to understand X, Y, and Z else that I'm telling them. It makes it a lot easier to focus on whatever else I'm telling them, because I'm speaking their language now. I'm speaking something that they understand and that they recognize. And I know we wanted to finish at 8:15, so we'll call it kind of a wrap up there, inshallah. if there are any kind of last minute questions, and Bismillah, feel free to send them through as fast as possible. If not, you know, I'm available to kind of answer questions.
Brother, thank you very much for your answer. First of all, I really appreciate it. Just want to have one little thing more to ask in regards of my question. Like, for me, I always feel very much worried about my children and how I can just put them together towards the Shia religion, because I basically belong from a pure Shia family, but I'm married in a mixed family. So majority in my over everybody here, majority is from Ahl Sunnat group. So
Yes.
that and my children lost their father 3 years ago. So they don't have Shia cousins we get along with. They don't have their father to take them to the mosque to Barga. And now as my son is getting older, he's 12 years, mashallah now. So I am thinking that he won't be able to be with me all the time, and I won't be able to be with him all the time as he's getting older. And I have no one in my family to look after him in the gen side or things like that. And I cannot take him everywhere to get the proper guidance for him.
Of course.
So in that regards, I always feel very scared, and I feel a lacking of the father there. And I feel difficult that how to deal in that kind of situation when majority of their friends are from the Ahl Sunnat fiqh, and they are kind of fantasizing the things they are doing. They are not too much towards the religion. They are doing everything in Muharram. They're enjoying everything. It's vacation time, holidays time, and then they are questioning me like, why only we? Even though they are our family, why not them? So it makes a lot of difficult for me. So any way I can help them to understand that thing. If I know it's something personal, I ask you, but any help, any idea?
I'd say the biggest influence on your kids at this stage, at this point, is their friends. Those are the people they want to be like. Those are the people they're going to try and spend time with. Those are the people they enjoy being with. Whatever you can to bring them close to friends who have the same beliefs as them, or as the same beliefs that you want them to have, do that. So give them license, or invite other kids round to your house, or give them license to have friends over, or to go to Shia friend's house, and make that their kind of core group of friends as much as you can. That means, and as a parent, what you can do to kind of influence that, it means, kids, they're often friends with people they spend time with. So as much time as they can spend with friends of the same belief, the better. So that could mean, like I say, inviting them around to your house, sending your kids around to their houses, spending time together, getting together on things like, Eids or Wiladats or Jeshans, things like that, getting together as much as you can outside of the mosque. The mosque, the Imam Barga, is massively important. If you can have them meeting those friends outside of the Imam Barga as well, the influence grows massively. The influence that those friends have on them, it will grow really big. There's a few last questions. Someone's asked my email. I'll put it down in the chat as well once we're finished. The shrines in Karbala seem very spread out. Surely when the burials eventually took place, they were not so spread out. How do we know the people who constructed the shrines placed them correctly? I'll be honest, I'm very, very, very blessed in that I can answer this one with absolute certainty. Obviously, most people, they see the shrines. I've, alhamdulillah, had the chance to go down underneath the shrines and see the actual graves. The graves are right there. You can see them. They're still as they were. Alhamdulillah, it's one of the biggest blessings of my life that I was able to go down and see the graves. I was able to see the stream of Al-Qamar around the grave of Hazrat Abu Fadl Abbas. But in terms of them being spread out, they're actually not that far apart. The grave of Hazrat Abbas is quite far away from the grave of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Otherwise, a lot of the graves are right by each other. Imam Hussein's grave is right next to Hazrat Ali Akbar's grave. What we call Ganja Shahida, which is like a mass grave of all the Shuhada, is right there as well. All in the shrine of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They're not that far apart. Alhamdulillah, I'm able to give my kind of witness that I've seen the actual graves down there, in that they are there underneath the shrines. That's where they are, alhamdulillah. I wish I could give a bit more of a kind of firm answer, but I can tell you I've seen it, they're there. My most memorable memory since my journey of reciting, when just started, I'll tell you my most memorable memory. I was reciting from that book I told you about, Tears for Karbala. I was still little at the time, I had the mic on me here. I was reciting and all of a sudden I lost my place where I was, and I went, on the mic, I went, oh God. And I just kind of put my head down. Everyone started laughing. I still remember that to this day. It was a fun little memory. I learned a lot from it. But it was just a funny one that I enjoyed at the time. But really and truly, the one that stuck with me the most was once when I was reciting Masa'ib at the shrine of Hazrat Abbas, Abu Fadl Abbas. I was able to recite Masa'ib there. Bearing in mind, there's not massive, we've gone over time, but this is a story that I love to tell any chance I get. I was reciting at the shrine of Hazrat Abbas. I was sitting on the mimbar, and right in front of me was the actual shrine inside the haram of Abu Fadl Abbas. And the last line of Masa'ib was very odd. You guys have seen me when I talk and when I recite. I've always got my hands moving around. I had my hand open like this on my lap. And somebody comes over to me and they put something in my hand, and I closed my hand and just like that. But I didn't look up. I'm not sure why. I didn't look up at who it was who handed it to me. All I saw was like this really white hand just come and put it in my hand. I closed my hand. After the majlis, I went around asking. I wanted to say thank you to whoever it was who gave me what was like a little bottle of perfume. I wanted to say thank you, so I asked all the people who were sitting in front of me, and most of them were like, "Oh, we had our heads down because it was Masa'ib, so we didn't see who it was." I asked one guy who was looking straight at me. He said, "No, I didn't see anyone who came towards you at all." And I asked a guy who was sitting right here, right next to the mimbar, like he was literally leaning against the mimbar. I asked him, I was like, they must have leaned over you to give me that. And he goes, "No, there was nobody. Like nobody came to you, nobody came near you, no one came to you in that majlis. But somehow I had this bottle of perfume." And that for me is without a doubt the most memorable experience that happened to me in the haram of Abu Fadl Abbas. And just for that one memory, for that one experience, I've always wanted to continue. There's never been a time, so for instance, like these last 12, 13 days now, they've been so hectic, majlis after majlis after majlis, from, for instance, Hounslow to Slough, back to Croydon or South West London, wherever. And alhamdulillah, as in, I never tire of it, just with that memory, just remembering that there is something otherworldly about these majalis. There is something more than what we realize is there. And I believe for everything we've had so far, I think we've answered all the questions that we had. Like I said, I'll put my email address in the chat so that anyone who wants to kind of send over any questions or anything like that, or any kind of thing you want, just let me know, and inshallah I'm here, always happy to help, always happy to be a part of it. I remember my first ever Ashra, my first ever 10 days of Majalis was at Hussaini Mission, so I owe a great deal to Hussaini Mission, everyone there, and the love I receive from you guys, alhamdulillah, every year, and throughout the year as well. It's unbelievable. I can't imagine it. So, as much as I can see everyone saying thank you in the group chat, my real thanks is from me to you guys, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart. It's amazing every year being here with you guys, and inshallah, I will see you guys soon, inshallah, as soon as possible. Jazakallah. Let me put my email address in there now. There we go. There you go. So my email address is in the I've sent that as a direct message, haven't I? I'll send that to everyone. .com. There you go. I've got my email address there in the chat. Inshallah, I will see you guys soon. And I'm very glad to have been here this year. Inshallah, year on year, we'll keep meeting, we'll keep spending time together. Inshallah, we'll keep learning together. Inshallah. Jazakallah.
Thank you very much, Brother Zaki. I would now like to invite Arif Uncle just to give off a closing statement.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I would like to say big thanks to Brother Zaki that he's been delivering his lecture since I think I can remember, since 5 years regularly basis in the Hussaini Islamic Mission. And I could see the messages of the parents that they are looking forward to see you next year. So you have to promise to us then you're going to be available next year for the to deliver again your 13 lectures in the Hussaini Islamic for the young youth and parents as well. Because and I also like to say thanks to parents, who those who brings their kids on a regularly basis and took the lots of information and knowledge from you. That's it. I'm looking forward to see you again, Brother Zaki. You have to contact me for the next year, and I'd like to invite you for the next year on air, that you're going to be a part of again of Ashra, first Ashra in a Hussaini Islamic mission. Thank you very much.
Inshallah, I'll try my best. I have to look at my commitments and things like that, but inshallah, we'll definitely speak about next year, inshallah.
I've seen so many messages for you. We're looking forward to see you next year in the Hussaini Islamic mission in first Ashra. Inshallah, we'll see you. So you're promising me for the next year.
Inshallah, I'll speak to you about next year.
Inshallah.
If you can.
Thank you very much once again. Honestly, you've done a wonderful job. People are so happy, and we got really good feedback from the people through our email, central email system, and the text messaging as well. Our IT team already received so many messages and feedback for you.
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. May Allah Azza wa Jalla accept it, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. So, salawat for your Sayyid and salam to Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. See you next.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. MashaAllah.